Greetings, everyone. Dr. Brian Scott with you today. This is Insight to the End Times. We're having a great time as we study prophetic scriptures in the Bible to see where we are on God's timetable as we approach the end of the age. We have been sharing these podcasts with you for some length of time now. And from the time we started, since we started until the present time, a lot has happened. Things that we were prophesying will come to pass, have come to pass. When you look at Matthew chapter 24, Jesus answered the question, what will be the sign of the end of the age? He answered by saying, well, there's going to be a lot of deception. But then he also went on to say, well, you'll see wars and rumors of war, and you'll see nation against nation, and you'll see earthquakes and pestilence and so on and so forth. These were physical and natural events occurring. Well, we've seen a lot of that occurring in the last few months, let alone the last couple of years. The news, almost every day, the breaking news is about nation versus nation, wartime. And then you have sprinkled in there another major earthquake. And then you have more virus news and pestilence news. So yes, we're in the last days. We're in the very, very end of this time period that we're living in. And who knows? We don't know. We're not allowed to know. Matthew 24 said, Jesus himself said, it's only in the hands of the Father as to when all this will occur. He hasn't told me, hasn't told the angels yet. But one of these days, he will turn to Jesus seated at his right hand, and he's going to say to Jesus, go get the church and bring the church home. That's called the pre-tribulation rapture. Following that, we're going to see 7 years of tribulation on this earth, referred to in Daniel chapter 12. God has reserved 1 week of years, one period of time, 7 years in length, exactly 7 years in length. And it is going to be a time of tremendous outpouring of God's wrath, judgment on the earth, as well as extreme evil from the evil one, the Antichrist. And you and I do not want to be here for that. That's why we're studying to see where we are. Jesus said, he was asked a question in Matthew 24, what will be the sign of your coming, and what will be the sign of the end of the age? And he begins to answer it. Well, we're flipping over to the book of 2 Timothy as well, in chapter 3, where the Apostle Paul writes to Pastor Timothy and shares with him that in these last days, perilous times will come. And they're here, and we're living in them right now, perilous times. And as we've been going through these verses, listing the various signs or elements of peril that are coming to the earth, we can say, oh, I see that. Yeah, that's happening. Yes, that's occurring.
Hey, this is Matt from Insights to the End Times. I wanted to interrupt just for a quick moment and ask you to do us a huge favor. If you could go ahead and hit the like, share, or subscribe button, it would allow us to make sure that you stay up to date with all the latest videos from Dr. Scott. Now back to the episode.
Well, we're in verse number 3. The first idea in verse number 3, the first sign was people will be unloving. And we covered that at great length in the last 2 episodes. Yeah. And today we're going to look at the next point. It's point number 9. This is the 9th element, of peril that's coming on the earth. It's called unforgiving. And this unforgiving is an inability to forgive someone. So there's a lack of desire to walk in forgiveness. Now, when Jesus went to the cross, we just had Easter here in the month of April. And while he was on the cross, he spoke 8 different words or 8 different sentences from the cross, even though he had gone through torture, etc., and was barely alive because of the torture he had gone through. He still had the strength and the determination to speak out 9 different phrases. And one of those phrases he spoke out and he said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Forgiveness is a very powerful spiritual force. It's a powerful release. We need to be forgiven in order to become a child of God. And God has released forgiveness upon this earth through the work of Jesus Christ. That's obviously what the Easter weekend was all about. Jesus paying the price to forgive mankind of their sins so mankind could be united with God. We call it salvation, be saved, becoming saved. But unforgiveness, oh my gracious, that's the lack of desire, the intention, the determination that I will not forgive you. Wow. Where does it flow from? Well, a lot of times there's a breaking of relationship. There's a breaking of trust. There's a breaking of covenant. And people will get married and they will have marriage vows and they're committing for better or worse, in sickness and in health, as the standard marriage ceremony says. We're going to stick together, husband and wife, until death do us part. And so what happens? Well, the death comes, but it's not a physical death. It's a death in the form of unforgiveness. We no longer get along. We have irreconcilable differences. Craziest stuff you ever heard of, leading to a divorce. But divorce exists everywhere. It exists in business relationships. It exists in partnerships. It exists in church settings, and so on and so forth. And divorce impacts people and children and society. So people walk away from their commitments and their covenant vows. And it mostly occurs because they have a spirit of unforgiveness. The ninth point we just studied in the last podcast was unloving. And that's without natural affection. So there's a deterioration that occurs of the family unit. This unforgiveness is the actual wiping it out. It's finished at that point. I want to give you some information here that I think will assist you in understanding this. Paul was telling us in these last days, perilous times are coming. You're going to see divorce and the breaking of covenant, the breaking of relationships, the deterioration in relationships, all resulting from unforgiveness, such that our society is going to see people cast adrift. So when you have a divorce in a family, and you have the husband and the wife separating and divorcing, almost, I don't know what the statistics are. I just saw it a great deal from my years as a lawyer, and I almost never saw a divorce that ended peacefully. There almost always were wars, fighting over everything. Who gets this? Who gets that? And et cetera, et cetera. But it has a huge, huge impact socially and psychologically on the family members, especially the children. And I want to share a couple of quick facts with you to show you how strong this impact is. So I'm going to compare kids coming from a divorced home versus children coming from a matrimonial home, a married home, where the spouses have stayed together. So the one side of this analysis will be kids who are being raised in a divorced home. Let's talk about high school dropouts. 31% of kids coming out of a divorced home will be a dropout. That's 1 in 3. Only 13% if they're coming from a married home. So that's well over twice as many will drop out coming out of a divorced home, an unforgiving home, in other words. That's a huge statistic. Here's the second one. Teen pregnancies, where a young girl gets pregnant as in her teen years. 33% of the girls coming out of a divorced home will end up with a teen pregnancy. That's 1 in 3 once again. Those are high percentages. Only 11% when they come out of a married home. So that's 3 times as many girls coming out of a divorced setting are going to become they'll become pregnant. They'll get pregnant in their teenage years. Folks, that's a disaster. And then here's a third one. And this is about men or males who end up in prison before they turn 32 years of age. So this is males in their teen years, in their 20s. How many of them will end up in prison before they turn 32? 11% of them from a divorced home versus 5% from a married home. So that's twice as many. In every one of these 3 categories that I've shared with you, kids coming out of a divorce, impacted by a divorce, are going to suffer twice or 3 times as often as kids who are in a married home. This spirit of unforgiveness is demonic. It exists everywhere. I saw it constantly when I was practicing. I saw it constantly. I've seen it constantly as a pastor. People who refuse to forgive. You don't know what they did to me. Many of them will say this to me, Pastor, you just don't know what it is to go through a divorce. And they're saying that from the point of view of the divorce I'm going through. My husband left me. My wife left me. They ran off with somebody else. We're fighting through this. You've not been through that. You can't relate to what I'm saying. My response is, I've been through more divorces than you've been through. I've been divorced by clients in my law practice. Long-term clients walk away from me for no reason at all. I've been divorced by more church members than I can even count. They would get mad, angry, upset, deceived, distorted in their thinking, but they would refuse to forgive me. And I wasn't the cause. So this is a serious issue. Here's some more statistics. I kind of like statistics, so let me share a few more. These are statistics, and unfortunately, these are from a few years ago, so I'm sure they've gone up significantly since the time I came across them. But the sociologists in the United States estimate that if the same matrimonial stability existed in the U.S. today as existed in the 1960s, if that stability of the 1960s existed today in the early part of the 21st century, then we would have some startling changes. For instance, 750,000 students would be fewer. 750,000 fewer students would have to repeat grades in school than exists today. If we had the stability of the 1960s still in existence in the early part of the 21st century. So I believe my numbers here are about 10 years old. So the early part of the 21st century, if we had the stability of the 1960s, then we'd have 750,000 kids who would not have to repeat grades that they're currently repeating. Here's a second statistic. We would have 1.2 million fewer school suspensions. That's 1.2 million fewer suspensions if there was more stability. Instead of divorced homes and unforgiving homes, we would have 500,000 fewer acts of juvenile delinquency. These are staggering numbers. And here's probably the most staggering number. We would have 70,000 fewer attempted suicides. So, folks, these statistics dealing with unforgiveness are massive. This is a demonic demonic attack against the family, against the nation, against Christianity. It's a sign of the very end. It's way out of control. Hallelujah. Do you realize that 35% of Christian couples will divorce? 35% of them. That's 1 in 3 will experience divorce themselves. They're supposedly Christians, but 35% of those marriages will end in divorce. And if those married partners get married again, 23% of them will get a second divorce. 1 in 4. So this spirit of unforgiveness that Paul refers to, we read these verses and we say, yeah, I'm familiar with unloving. Yeah, well, I got some people who are unloving. It's too bad. Unforgiving, yeah, I got some people who are unforgiving. They should really change their act and change their attitude and so on. But you don't realize these are demonic spirits. These are demons that are pressing these buttons constantly and driving people to these places of defeat and destruction. It's horrendous. Here's some stuff I've experienced. I saw partnerships in business deteriorate on an ongoing basis. It was a rarity to see a partnership stay in business for very long. I saw marriages fall apart. I saw friendships disappear overnight. I personally have experienced this with some of my closest and dearest friends, and I'm like, what happened to you? Where'd you go? What's going on? People that we thought were covenant friends forever and ever just disappear on us, have nothing to do with us, won't even speak to us. And we're sitting there thinking, I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what's going on. Here's another one. Church to church to church. Transplants. People that come and sit in our church and tell us, thank you. This is the greatest setting I've ever been in. I have been asking God for this. I've been praying about this for years. I finally have found it. Oh my goodness, I'll be with you until the very end. And my definition of the very end and theirs were very different, because about 6 months later, they were gone. And they were transplanted elsewhere. Do you realize that if you are a gardener and you keep transplanting plants from one place to another place to another place, that after a couple of transplants, those plants die? Because their root system is exposed to all of the attacks of weather and new soil and everything else. It's actually unbelievable. I don't even want to tell you how much money is spent in legal fees on these divorces that are occurring. But when a child goes through a divorce, 89% of kids who go through a divorce are likely going to end up divorcing themselves. That's 9 out of 10. Oh my goodness. And when they go through lawsuits, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars being spent on lawyers to fight their cause for them. And they're not pleased when it's over. They've got a spirit of anger and attack, and they want to just continue it. So unloving will end up in unforgiveness, and unforgiveness is going to end up in destruction. And we're seeing this everywhere. The statistics pointed out to us we're living in perilous times when it comes to the family, the home, the businesses, etc. Unforgiveness is a huge attack. I'll see you next week. We got some great stuff as we continue this study. See you then. Be blessed. Amen.
Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Insights to the End Times. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to get notified every time we release a new video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right over here. Now, if you'd like to catch the previous episode, you can do that right here, or the entire playlist is right above, right here. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next episode of Insights to the End Times.